당연히 들인데 저런 비유는 센스 남긴 게 안에 너를 계획이 나버려 애는 비디오 나버려 안 상으로야
This morning, I would like to offer my auspicious wishes and greetings to everyone listening over the internet, all of the lamas, the tulkus, the spiritual friends, the monks and nuns, and all of my Dharma friends. Now, today we will continue speaking about the First Council, and today we are speaking about the positions of the schedules. Here, this includes the discussion of the aim of the First Council, the time and location of the First Council, the participants in the Council, and the sequence of this Council. And so here we are discussing about talking about all these stages. We've come to the first three. So now we've come to this position of talking about the order of events at the Council. It's better to just assume that it's okay. Now among the discussions of the sequence of the Council, the different points, when you think about the order of events in the Council, regarding this, the Indian scholar S.R. Goyal the actual sequence of events at the council was the Mahakashapa presided over the council. And the people who led the Guru's reputation or compilation of the Vinaya and Dharma were the Upali and the Ananda. And he says that there are essentially no disputes about the content. Generally, during the Dharma was recited or compiled by Ananda. So Dharma, of course, means the teachings or the sutras. And then the Vinaya was recited or compiled by Upali. In brief, he's saying that basically what was compiled at that time were the Dharma and the Vinaya. And this is the normal presentation. Now, if we speak about the compilation of the Vinaya in particular, the Japanese scholar Umada Gyoke says that when they were holding the compilation of the Vinaya, the recitation, that Upali was the foremost upholder of the Vinaya. And so they asked him to first recite the precepts of the Vinaya. And then also to describe the time that the various rules of the Vinaya were made, the place they were made, the circumstances because of which they were made, and the questions and answers, and then the rule that was made, and so forth. And so it was basically at that point they settled what the content of their is saying, that this rule was made at this time in this place in these circumstances. And they established the content for each of the different. And when we speak about the sutras or the Dharma,
l'érudit Gyoke affirme que donc
what Gyoke says is that the person who was most versed and had the foremost of those wide listening in the sutras was Ananda. So he's the one who recited the Buddha's sermons and their background stories. And so he described the situation, the background stories of each, whom they were said for, what time and what place they were described for. And so he clearly explained each of these for each of the Buddha Sutras. There's also an English scholar, A.K. Warder, because Nanda was different than others, that he was one who had heard the most teachings from the Buddha. As it is generally said, before he became the Buddha's attendant, he asked the Buddha to grant him certain conditions, and one of them was that the Buddha should teach all of his teachings to Ananda. And so because he set this condition, then among all the people who had heard the Buddha teach the Dharma, he was the one who had heard the most. And so in that time, Mahakashapa would ask questions regarding the meaning of each of the sutras, and Ananta would say, I remembered it from his own memory. He hadn't forgotten anything. He taught everything that he remembered. And finally, after that, the Sangha would decide whether there had been any mistakes in that. So Mahakashapa would ask questions, Ananda would answer them. And at that time, there were many arhats there, and they're saying, oh, this is okay, this isn't quite right. And they would decide all that, and in the end, they would settle on the sutra. Now, the French scholar Etienne Lamotte says at that time, Ananda told the bhikshus that before the parinirvana, the Buddha had said that it would be okay to discard the minor precepts, or the precepts that were not so important. So he mentioned this, and once he said this, at that time, Ananda had not asked the Buddha to clarify what the precepts that were minor were for, what the unimportant precepts were. And so for that reason, the bhikshus gathered at that time, when they were unable to come to a consensus about that issue. Someone said that these are the minor precepts, or someone said something else of that. And so the question of what were the minor precepts or what were the precepts? And if we say that they may be discarded or abandoned, if you're going to do that, then you have to first decide how do you identify the minor precepts. And the Sangha had many different ideas about this because no one had asked the Buddha. If the Buddha had actually given a clear answer, there would have been no dispute. But Ananda didn't ask the Buddha. And so when the Buddha all discussed their opinions, some would say it was this, some say something else. And so they didn't have a consensus. And because there was no consensus, then in the end, Mahakashapa offered the opinion that all the rules the Buddha had made should be left as they were, and that there was no exceptions should be made. It was better not to make any exceptions. And so when he made that suggestion, everyone agreed to it. And so when you speak about discarding or relaxing the minor precepts, then they decided that it would be best to go in the direction of keeping all of the precepts that the Buddha said. And that was the decision that they made. Now to continue with this. Now, the next issue is the duration of the council and other associated events. Now, the Japanese scholar Yoke says that at that time, many members of the Sangha had come to compile the Sangha. Actually, the word for compiling, it has another meaning, which means, or in a different translation, could be like a group recitation. A group recitation is what the meaning. So you can either call it a compilation or you can call it a group recitation. In any case, they all gathered. And they all gathered, and he said that it took them 7 months for them to complete it. Now, I don't know what his basis for saying this was, but in any case, he does say this. Normally, we say it was 3 months. Now here, normally we say that it's 3 months, but he says that it took 7 months. Now, another description, another way that is described that is that after Mahakashyapa held the council, he went to meet King Ajatashatru because the sponsor, the patron of the council had been the king Ajatashatru, the king of Magadha. And King Ajatashatru made a suggestion at that point. Now, the suggestion he made is that it's in order to commemorate the date of the parinirvana. From that time on, the way they calculated the calendar in Magadha should calculate from the year of the parinirvana as year 1. So as that year of the parinirvana would be considered the year 1, and so when you count the years, they should be established based on that. So this is the King Ajatashatru's suggestion. And so for this reason, this is how the origination of the calculation of the calendar according to the date of the parinirvana, or the Buddhist calendar. So this is an important point, but I don't need to speak about that at length right now. Likewise, another important event that happened in relation to the council is as to the related according to Goya. During the first council, one important topic of discussion was the decision to oppose the Brahma penalty, the Brahma Pandam, the Buddhist charioteer, the Buddhist chariot driver Channa. So this was one important point. So this is the decision to impose the Brahma penalty or the Brahma Danda. Now the reason is that even though he was a picture, he really was very rude to everyone in the Sangha. He was always incredibly prideful, and he was incredibly prideful. So they imposed the Brahma penalty upon him, and then he was no longer allowed to participate in any Sangha activity. And once he had been penalized in this way, Channa himself felt grand, and he confessed, and eventually he achieved the state of Arhat. What I would like to speak about next. Oh, I've already discussed that. Sorry. But to continue with the debate about the first council. Now, the evidence and the thoughts that people have about the historicity of the first council and the first person who raised the doubt about whether the Rajagriha Council was a historical event was the Russian scholar D.P. Minayev. So he was the first one to raise the doubt as to whether the Rajagriha Council had occurred. In 1887, that is 1887, this is, he wrote a monograph in which he writes that because of the lack of the first council in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra and the long discourses, this is the Pali edition of the long discourses. So within that, there is no, in the Parinirvana Sutra, there is no account of the first council. And so for this one, he says that the first council was merely an account made up by later generations. And it was made up in order for each school to show that it had authentic origins. After this, the German scholar Hermann Oldenberg says that there is no historical evidence for this council, he said. But he says merely, he says the discussion, the first council is not described in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra. But if you say that that mere absence of a description of it in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra is proof or evidence for the first council not occurring, that is not reliable evidence. And there is a Japanese scholar called Tsukamoto Keisho, and he wrote in 1966 a book called A Study of the History of Early Buddhist Orders. And so what he did is he looked at the scriptures that have been translated into Chinese. Now, the earlier scholars had primarily looked at the Pali scriptures, but he looking at the Chinese sources. As he researched the issue of the first council, he was still not able to give a really good answer to the debate as to whether the council had happened or had not happened. He said that he was not able to really definitively answer this question. Now, among the Buddhist researchers, most of the Japanese scholars and a later Chinese master who researched the Buddhism named In Shung, he was a great scholar also. And what they all say is that the three Pitakas were compiled over a rather long period of time, over several centuries. Since they're passed down over many different centuries, over that time, many people improved it or compiled or recompiled it. They did a lot of work on the canon. And so for that reason, the three Pitakas, the three baskets that we have, the form of the three Pitakas, or the extent of them, is something that developed over many centuries, as many people edited and compiled more, and so forth. It's not like there was an original set of the three Pitakas that was found in Rajagriha that came to us exactly as it is into our hands. So for that reason, we cannot categorically say that the four talk about the first council as based upon the four agamas and the Vinayas as sources for the first council. We cannot categorically say that they are correct because the text that we have there are some differences between the texts of the four agamas that we have now and the texts that were settled at Rajagriha. This is because many people have recompiled and edited and changed the texts. So it's been handled by many different people. So the situation or the events of the compilation of the Dharma at the time cannot be just solely determined by what we have these times today. Now, if we think about it in a traditional way, the three baskets were in their Pitakas were in their entirely compiled at council. They originated at that time. And as they passed down through each of the different transmissions or the different schools, and they weren't changed at all, nothing was added, nothing was subtracted. And so the texts that were compiled at Rajagriha were passed down to us without any changes or alterations, additions or subtractions. So we have no choice but to accept them as they say that they haven't changed at all. They say. And so we all think that ours is the true text that was written out at Rajagriha. Now, this is a rather simple way of thinking, without thinking about any of the changes that must have happened over several centuries. So one thing that the three baskets that were compiled at the Vulture Peak Mountain at that time, if we think in this way, then there are actually there are many different problems that come with this, because if it would be one thing if all the schools were exactly the same, but they're not. There are many differences between the different schools. It's we can't categorically say that the words in the different schools are the same. And because they aren't the same, then many disputes have arisen, because one school says ours is right and theirs is not. And so this creates a lot of difficulties. If we were instead to think that the changes are because it's passed down for over many centuries, and then when it comes down to us from someone writes it down by hand, and so it's because there may be mistakes or changes or additions or subtractions, omissions, and so forth. Now, because we don't accept, if you don't accept that there may have been changes or omissions or additions over the years, then many difficulties come from that. And when the non-Buddhists see these difficulties in the Buddhists, and they say, "Oh, you have these problems, you have these questions, you have these faults and problems," and so they accuse the Buddhists in this way. And actually, to think in such a simple way, in such a traditional way, needs to be actually expanded. And we need to think about it from all different perspectives, and then there won't be any difficulty. Similarly,
Oxford University, Oxford Richard Richard Gombajim Sumde.
there's an Oxford University professor called Richard Gombrich, however you pronounce his name, Richard Gombrich. And he says that in the long discourses, there's a sutra called the Sutra of the 32 Marks. So among the four agamas, there are the long discourses. And there's a sutra there called the Sutra of the 32 Marks. And it's said that this was compiled by Shaliputra, the council that Shaliputra happened. And for this reason, he has the opinion that there were councils to maintain the transition to the true Dharma, even during the Buddha's lifetime. Because it said that the Sutra of the 32 Marks and the long discourses was compiled by Shariputra. And so he says for that reason that there must have been a compilation of the Dharma even during the lifetime of the Buddha. And so for this reason, so this is what I have to say about the First Council. No, we need to think about, and we followers of Buddhism, and in particular, what we members of the Sangha need to think about when we're studying and contemplating. Beginning from the 19th century, Western scholars, non-Buddhist scholars, began to research Buddhism. And from that time, then it also began eventually in Japan. And so most of them are lay people. And they were not all Buddhists. They didn't all have faith in Buddhism. And when they looked at Buddhist histories, they had interest in this, and they began their researches in even the 19th century. Now, among us Tibetans, we need to have a more broader way of thinking that fits better with contemporary methods, and to have a more relaxed way of looking at it. And I think if we do this, it's very important. It's very important for us to engage in such research. The reason for that is the things that the contemporary researchers raise questions about are not without any basis. These are things that we also need to think about. Actually, these questions should be questions that first come up within Buddhism. because we're the ones who maintain Buddhism, right? Sustain Buddhism. And these are questions that really should be raised first among us Buddhists, but instead, when it's coming from outside, it's actually something that's rather embarrassing for us. And it's a little uncomfortable. And so for this reason, during this Marnok summer teachings, I've been looking into things that are written in other languages. I've been looking at what is written by contemporary searches. And the reason for this is that we've come to the 21st century. And the teachings of the Buddha Dharma needs to go along with the times. It needs to follow the manners of the times. And so if we can have more people who take interest in this, then definitely in the future, then it will bring this benefit in upholding, preserving, and propagating the teachings. And so this is why I've been working so hard to do this during this teaching. That's probably better for me not to say too much. No, but actually, I think this is actually a good place to stop, because for the past few days, I haven't been feeling quite so well. I don't know whether it's my blood pressure is increasing or something. It's like my body's giving me a signal that I need to stop this, or I need to. So when I lie down at night to sleep, and then I wake up many times as I'm sleeping. I'm not sleeping well. And so I think it's better to just make this point here. Last year we did 14 sessions, and this year we also have had 14 sessions. And so that's basically how it is. And so if I continue to push myself too hard, it's probably not so good. Now, next, I have 3 points that I'd like to discuss. The first of these is that on the 11th, we will have the Shakyamuni Puja. And people are asking, what time will we hold this? And so I've been asking people about what the best time to hold or I will first discuss with various people and determine what the best time is, and then I will announce it in a couple of days. I cannot really say right now what it is. I need to speak with various people about this first. When we're doing the Shakyamuni Puja, and people are asking, what sort of offerings should we prepare? We should make a rather larger Shase Torma. There are the Shase Tormas that we make for the Kajimuna that are basically 1 cubit, the length of your forearm. And the best. If you make small Shase, then you can make 100 of them. But if you're making large ones, if they're this size, if you can make a set of 7. And if you're making small Shase, then you can either make 21. The best would be 100, and if not, then 21 would be okay for the smaller ones. For the large ones, you should have 1 set of 7. And the smaller ones should have the incense sticks crossed, and then in the middle you should have flowers, as we ordinarily do. You also need the requisites of the bhikshu, the alms bowl, the 3 dharma robes that haven't been used by anyone else. Now, and the ringing staff. Now, with the ringing staff that hasn't been used by anyone, that's difficult. But if you have dharma robes that have not been used by anyone, then you may use them as because we have the requisites of a bhikshu: the ringing staff, the alms bowl, an alms bowl that is filled with fruit or with various medicinal herbs. And if you put that up, that would be good. And so they're the offerings that should be made. And then you should also prepare a mandala. And you should prepare that mandala. And the question is whether you should bathe or not first, or whether you should. It's probably best to prepare the things for the ritual ablution during the puja, not to bathe beforehand, but to do that. I've done it basically. I've basically completed this, but I've got a couple little things. So I have a little bit of. I haven't decided whether I should include the ritual of ablution or bathing the Buddha. And so, in case there is, you should prepare that. So that is about the Shakyamuni Puja. Now, the second topic is that many people are asking me, will we have a Kaju Munam this year or not? No, it's not. This is not something that I can decide on my own. But if I look at the situation, for the time being this year, I think maybe it's better not to hold it this year. During the Kaju Munam, people come from all over the world to gather. And when everyone gets together, then if we do it as we did before, then it's actually not as so easy to handle. So I think that for this time being, it's better not to hold it. However, the Kaju Gunche and our nuns' spring dharma should be held. So you have the Kaju Gunche, and the location where the Kaju Gunche will be held will be at the Mirik Shedra. And the reason for this is that normally the Kaju Gunche is when we have a Kaju Munam, so all the Sangha members stay in tents when you hold the Kaju Munam. It's a little difficult, right? So normally when you have the Kaju Munam, you usually have the Sangha, then at that point, there's no choice but to stay in tents, because at that point, when everyone comes, we don't have enough rooms for everyone. So there's no choice but to stay in tents. But this year, if we are only holding the Guja, then there's no need to go through all the difficulties of staying in Tibets, or staying in tents. And since the Mirik Shedra is a rather large building, it seems, I haven't gone myself, but I look at the pictures, it seems that way. It's actually very near Siliguri. There's a Boka Shedra near there. And so for the people coming from Nepal, it's very easy for them to get there. So it's easy to get to, and it has all the facilities, so I think that'll work out well there. So that would be the winter dharma, and then the nuns' spring dharma teachings will be held at Varanasi in the Vajravidya. I asked Khenchen Trungpa Rinpoche about it, and he said it's okay. So the nuns' spring dharma teaching will be held at Varanasi. So it used to be a winter dharma, so now we're holding the spring dharma teaching at Varanasi. Now, the third topic, something I can't say too much, but I'm getting a little bit. So the third point there is a tulku in Tibet from the area of Sichuan and Kansa tulku in the Chakzan district. In the Chinese, it's called Lutianshan. In any case, he went there, and there are quite a few people who died in an earthquake in that region. And at the same time, there was a woman whom everyone calls the Penza Ama, the library lady. We don't know her actual name, but the library lady. And she passed away at so her daughter passed away, and she asked, or someone passed away, and they're asking me to do the to do the purification or the name card ritual for her. And she's asking me to do this. Please absolutely do this. Now, I don't have all the things you need to do that. I don't have anything other than my Vajra and bell, so I can't do that. So I thought that it would be better to have recite an aspiration prayer with the Sangha, and this will serve for that. So today, we'll recite the Akshobhya prayer and the prayers for people rebirth in Dewa Chen on the behalf of the people from that, because there are many people who perished in the earthquake in Sichuan. No, I think it's basically, if everyone else also who here is doing that, if we all raise our prayers, I think it'll do. There's also a Lama named Kompo Lama, and he also passed away the other day. He was a long-time acquaintance of mine. He's passed away. And so please make aspirations for them. I will lead everyone that. No, I can't be much of an aspiration for this. This is the prayer, prayer for the rebirth in Sukhavati by the seventh karma, by the fifth Karmapa.
Kundo zibe mindo na zoba kunse namre zola chaze lo yunre sewe shingwen kyabze de ishi jenge jungse sebe Dudi bonzo ma le jinze ba ba me kuye la chaze lo sida jiwa ramba namre go ngo nyi ye yin ma yu on
page 150 of the Kaji Munlam book. According to their faculties in all times and all directions, I prostrate to the light of boundless speech. I prostrate to the effortless, spontaneous, right words that transcend speech, thought, and description. The inconceivable secret of speech that teaches the supreme excellent path. Naturally luminous, unseen like space, the play of all-encompassing pristine wisdom expands the mandala that knows all there is to know. I prostrate to the light of boundless mind. Though all phenomena are naturally pacified and ceasing appearances are dazzling. Your vision is totally pure and pacified, but likewise you see all. I bow to you. You are the wish-fulfilling sustenance for beings, the infinite's body, speech, mind, pristine wisdom. Immeasurable compassion and activity, O Amitabha, I always prostrate to you. I mentally take an offer to the Sugatas, bodies and riches both real and imagined, and all to the ends of space that is not owned. Think of this lowly one with love and take my gifts. I confess and admit all the misdeeds and offenses that I or any other being has done, and never recommit such acts again. May I commit a consecration be forever extinguished. I rejoice in the merit of all the victors and their children, listeners, self-Buddhas, and all wanderers. Ask all Buddhas and tender actions to turn the wheel of Mahayana Dharma. I pray them to remain not passing beyond for infinitely many oceans of eons. I dedicate any virtue done in the 3 times to the great awakening for the benefit of others, until I reach the essence of enlightenment in this and all my births. Into the future, may I be cared for by exalted lamas, and may my bodhicitta never wane. May I gain the highest leisure and riches with good family, body, wealth, and Dharma friends. May I train step by step in the Buddha's teachings with interest, diligence, and carefulness. May any act that leads to birth in the 3 lower realms and other leisureless words in unbearable samsara in this very lifetime ripen on me fully, never to be experienced in another life. May I perfect generosity and discipline and patience, diligence and meditation, wisdom and wondrous means and aspiration, power and oceans of primordial wisdom. Without regard for life in them, my mind made workable, my mind tamed through solid, rich with the Dharma, the scripture, and realization. May I always be loving and aware, the essence of samsara's nirvana, the essence of conception, pristine wisdom. May I have wisdom that knows dharmata, transcending either single or multiple. May I enter into the qualities of the Sugatas who dwell in the profound interdependence, the Dharmakaya, definitive and unelaborate, with the powers, qualities, pristine wisdom, activity, and so forth. Wherever I go, my mind filled with delight, may I act utterly purely with my body and my mind. My speech melodious, may I teach the oceans of the Dharma. and be just like the bodhisattvas in my conduct. Until I attain such qualities as those, may I have riches and a deathless life that conquers all adversity entirely. May I accomplish all my aims just as I wish, and when this life's appearances are soon to disappear, may I be blessed by the Sugata and his children. May I realize the radiant meaning, and then may infinite gods and goddesses come bearing infinite offerings to welcome me. My mind, full of great bliss, may go easily to the completely pure realm of Sukhavati. Stay in this appearance and its nature, Ktavadati. There in a massive orange, I may see the Lord of Dharma, Amitabha, the center of a lotus of great heaps of jewels, together with 1,000 billion bhikshus. Red like the setting evening sun, blazingly radiant, surrounded by a song of the children of the victors, may I behold the Saggava whose sight can't satisfy. And then receive a prosophy of great enlightenment. I then completely perfect amazing bodies and from the fruit of accumulation of virtue, and sing auspicious melodies in praise of the Bhagavan. May I be inseparable always from the great Maitreya, Manjushri, and Samantabhadra, Avalokiteshvara, Mastama Prapta, and the other bodhisattvas. May I engage equally in the ways of liberation. By acting lucidly on oceans of liberations, may I take up all the means of the oceans of Mahayana, achieve the realizations of the ocean principle, and liberate all waters from the ocean of existence. May I continually purify oceans of realms, increase the oceans of the true accumulations, and ripen and mature oceans of sentient beings. May I accomplish oceans of aspirations, just as the Buddhas of the past developed bodhicitta, made aspirations, performed deeds, and had great powers, to whom I bring every single being swiftly to the state of Buddhahood. Now we're reciting an aspiration for rebirth in the land of Amitabha, written by the Shamar, the 7th Shamar Rinpoche.
소수를 샤네네 렌지미게 dom라네바게 파게게 조글라 이라제 게나메제게 골로고 그냥에 민드르주버서 제레게와 전주쟁을 강원대배 상계 제정보 민주계회
goes under the Bodhi tree in Abhirati. There sits in glorious radiance Akshobhya with the sweet Shravakas and Bodhisattvas. I humbly bow to them with body, speech, and mind. I offer to the Sugata and his children a cloud of offerings to fill the sky with a delightful wealth of gods and humans, its actual, imaginary, or unknown. From the 3 poisons since beginningless time, I have done wrongs that cause the lower realms and rebirth. I regret them and confess. I shall abide by vows never to do such acts again. I rejoice in the virtue of all noble and other beings and pray the victors turn the Dharma wheel, remaining without passing to nirvana. I dedicate this virtue to enlightenment. May I fill the 8 great aspirations to never get angry with Sharma and so forth. Akshobhya, once when here as bodhicitta, made the Buddha name great eyes in the past. May I perform the 18 acts that he aspired to do, such as as I promised. Think of the Buddha with each step by step, and in my every lifetime go forth from my home. May I fulfill his 7 earnest prayers, to never talk of downfalls in the 4 communities, that moral faults have been heard of in that realm, that spirit has good qualities, who are awakened and so forth. Just as Akshobhya did while he was training, I'll go from Buddha realm to Buddha realm while pleasing the Tathagatas, may I not disappoint them even for a single instant. May I be celibate in all my lives, and each beginning only from the Dharma, the transcendences, never at all fatigued or worried in my body or my mind. Through all the merit of that gift of Dharma, may the Bodhisattvas in my Buddha realm not forget Dharma when they take rebirth and be reborn within the realm to which they aspire. May they be never parted from the Buddhas, always attending them respectfully. May Mars and demonic kinds of spirits never find any opportunity at all, just as I wish for myself for the true Dharma. May sentient beings have a wish for Dharma till they perfect qualities like this. May I perfect the conduct of enlightenment. After I die and leave this world, may I be born in the pure realm of Abhayarajita, in the presence of the Bhagavan Akshobhya, pleasing with achievement on the path of Bodhi. May I possess as many qualities as the great Bodhisattva Bhaganahasta and other Bodhisattvas in that realm. May I always be celebrated by the Buddhas, just as the Bhagavana's prophecy does Bodhisattva's great enlightenment, to reach the irreversible state and gain a prophecy of great enlightenment. May I uphold the Bhagavan's true Dharma, display the conduct of awakening ever, perfect the oceans of the true accumulations, and ripen full the oceans of sentient beings. In brief, may I act just as did Akshobhya in his resolve, conduct, and aspirations. May I achieve a state like that Bhagavan's in a pure world that is akin to Agamabhirati. And then His Holiness also recited a couple other dedications on behalf of the deceased. This basically completes our teachings, and I haven't much more to say, so it's better to leave it here now. I thought maybe there was something else I should say. What was it? My brain isn't working well. I guess that must be it. Oh, that's right. You can offer the mandala offerings and Thanksgiving on the 11th. So the virtue at the end is reciting the Shakyamuni Pujan, and then at the end, then you can make the mandala offerings. So that is, what did I say today? So now we will have the dedication prayers. We will recite the Mahamudra aspiration by Rangjung Dorje. Next, we will recite the Mahamudra aspiration.
Nam Sangye, Jai Mato Vange, Thank you.